What's up mga kuya, welcome back to the channel. So this is my full review on the POCO M5s, which should have been uploaded during the first week of September, but since I've been, as you can hear from my voice, I'm not sure what I caught, but I'm feeling significantly better now. And this review video has been way overdue, so yeah, this is the POCO M5s, and special thanks to POCO for sending me a review unit, very nice. So the POCO M5s is a new mid-range smartphone from POCO alongside the POCO M5, and the main difference of this M5s to the regular POCO M5 is that the M5 has a faster and more efficient chipset and a 90Hz display, which this doesn't. Although this does have an AMOLED display as compared to the IPS LCD on the regular POCO M5. And here's the full spec list on the POCO M5s. You guys can just pause the video. And what I have with me is the blue color option, which I'm not really a fan of, although there is a gray and white option for the POCO M5s. Also, this is the 6GB 128GB variant and is also available in a 4GB 64GB variant. Although considering the small difference in price, of course, I'd much rather recommend the 6GB 128GB variant of the M5s. About 1,000 pesos more or $20 more for 2 more gigs of memory and double the storage. And really the main specs that you guys need to know about the POCO M5s is this does have an AMOLED display, a 6.4-inch 1080p AMOLED display, a MediaTek Helio G95 chipset, a 64-megapixel main sensor on a quad camera setup, 5000 mAh battery with 33 watts of fast charging. And kind of an underrated thing with these budget to mid-range smartphones is this does have dual stereo speakers. So yeah, proceeding with my review on the POCO M5s, starting with build quality and design. So regarding design, this has been recycled from Xiaomi Redmi Note 10 Pro. So we do have the POCO branding here, camera modules here, along with the LED flash. And the back here is a matte finish and not a glossy finish. Thank you. You know how I feel about that, although this isn't 100% safe from fingerprints. This is way better compared to, of course, a glossy finish. And weirdly enough, POCO made the side plastic frame a glossy finish. Not sure why. But on the right side, we do have a power button / fingerprint scanner, which is fast and accurate for the most part. Volume rockers, which are fairly clicky. On the left side, we do have a dual SIM card tray along with a micro SD card slot. And at the top, we do have these holes which actually act as speakers along with the earpiece speaker grill, IR blaster, secondary noise cancelling microphone. And at the bottom, we do have a 3.5mm headphone jack. Very nice. Main microphone, USB Type-C port, and then the bottom firing speaker grill. At the front again, we do have a 6.4-inch display along with a hole punch for the 13-megapixel front-facing camera. The side bezels are not the thinnest in the world, and of course we do have a sizable bottom chin. And what's great with the hole punch for the front-facing camera is we don't have those thick black bars around it like with hole punches on IPS LCD displays. So overall, the design is meh. Of course, I've seen this before, but the good thing is this is IP53 dust and splash resistant, so you can use this in the rain or in the shower but not submerge it underwater, take note. And regarding build quality, we do have a solid build here, even though we do have a plastic back and the plastic frame solid overall. And moving on to the display, which is great and at the same time is not so great. So again, this is an AMOLED display, but this is just a 60Hz display. So yeah, this doesn't have 90Hz display, just like with most mid-range smartphones we see these days. I mean, don't get me wrong, the quality of the display is great, but the phone just feels sluggish. And with that MediaTek Helio G95, which should be a solid chipset. I mean, yeah, it is a solid chipset, but with this display, I'm gonna talk about that more in performance. So colors are great, they're not oversaturated. Of course, also considering that I set this up in the standard color scheme. Of course, if you want a more vibrant display and of course more punchy colors, then you can set it to vivid here in the color scheme. Overall, black levels are good for an AMOLED display, although not the deepest blacks I've seen on an AMOLED display, to be honest. And the brightness here is really good, 1000 nits of brightness in auto mode under direct sunlight, which is perfectly readable outdoors. Viewing angles are great, there's very little color shift or pretty much no color shift even at extreme angles. And if you were gonna ask me, I would much rather have an IPS LCD display on this phone but with a 90Hz display, so I'm willing to sacrifice an AMOLED display for a 90Hz display. So just for this having an AMOLED display and a pretty decent AMOLED display even for a mid-range smartphone, I'm giving this a solid A. Okay, maybe A minus. And moving on to the cameras on the POCO M5s, so we do have a quad camera setup, a 64 megapixel main sensor with an f1.8 aperture, 8 megapixel ultra-wide sensor with an f2.2 aperture, 2 megapixel macro sensor with an f2.4 aperture, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor with an f2.4 aperture. And for the front-facing camera, we do have a 13 megapixel sensor with an f2.4 aperture. And you can take some pretty good pictures with the POCO M5s. Real good colors, they're not oversaturated at all. Surprisingly neutral colors for a POCO device. Good detail, but the main weakness of the camera on the POCO M5s is dynamic range, which it does tend to overexpose. And you can take some pretty good selfies, although I'm not sure what's like going on with this portrait mode. I mean, it's decent with the edge detection, but it changes the color of my skin compared to the default mode. I'm not sure what's up with that. But yeah, hopefully something that POCO can fix through a software update. And of course, you can record up to 4K on the main sensor, but with no stabilization whatsoever. Okay, so this is the vlog test for the POCO M5s recording at 1080p at 30 fps, and what you're hearing right now is from the built-in microphone. And unfortunately, you can't actually record at 4K using the front-facing camera and no video stabilization whatsoever. So yeah, overall pretty solid camera performance on the POCO M5s. And moving on to the performance here, which should be good. Should more on that in a little bit. But yeah, this does have again a MediaTek Helio G95 chipset, UFS 2.2 storage, and paired with 6 gigs of memory, multitasking, opening, closing apps, browsing through the UI. I should say great, but honestly paired with just a 60Hz display, the display is kind of like bottlenecking the performance of this phone. I've actually like turned on the cheat code with like making your Android phone faster with the, of course, developer options, of course, with window animation scale, transition animation scale, and animator duration scale all set to 0.5. Just not having a 90Hz display here, at least a 90Hz display on this phone, really hurts the experience. That's why I said the performance of the POCO M5s should be good. Just like simply scrolling here, browsing web pages, especially like something like browsing Facebook, Twitter, feels slow or sluggish, mainly because of that 60Hz display. Although one of the saving grace of this phone when it comes to performance is the dual stereo speakers, which sound pretty good. Although they're not the loudest I've heard on a smartphone, obviously, the sound is pretty clear, and the volume is pretty much balanced on the two speakers. And of course, with that G95 chipset, this is a really good gaming smartphone. Well, budget gaming smartphone. So first game is League of Legends Wild Rift set at 60 FPS, super high, all high pretty much on the graphic settings here. So as you can see with Wild Rift, no hiccups whatsoever, really smooth experience overall. And next up is PUBG Mobile. Okay, so we are set at the HDR graphic settings at ultra frame rate with the anti-aliasing at 2x. and of course Genshin Impact. And yes, while you can play at the highest graphic settings here on the M5s on Genshin Impact, I found like the sweet spot for Genshin Impact is setting it at the high graphic settings, a high graphic preset with motion blur turned off, and at of course 60 FPS. So yeah, overall a pretty solid experience for Genshin Impact here on the POCO M5s. And yes, sa mga magtatanong, okay ba to sa ML, okay ba to sa Call of Duty Mobile? Yes, it can handle Genshin Impact just fine, so it won't have any problems in those games. And of course, last up is battery life here on the POCO M5s, which is actually surprisingly good. Although, one thing with MIUI 13 is it actually like got rid of screen on time here on the battery settings. Like, you won't be able to see how much screen on time you've had on your device, which kind of sucks. But with my typical use of medium to heavy use, so this is a combination of social media, watching videos, some gaming, and picture taking, and I was able to comfortably end the day with over 60% left. And yeah, I'm confident to say that I was able to get my usual 6 hours of screen on time. And of course, with the POCO M5s capable of 33 watts of charging with the included power brick in the box, you can easily charge this phone from 0 to 100 in just a little over 1 hour, about 1 hour and 10 minutes. So battery life on the POCO M5s is definitely an S. And ironically, of course, this having a 60Hz display helps with battery life, since of course it's not like pushing more hertz or FPS, although it's just sad. Yeah, and to be honest, the POCO M5s is a solid all-around mid-range smartphone, but just with that 60Hz display bogging down or holding back, yeah, it's kind of holding back performance on this phone with like simply scrolling, not really with games though. The performance aspect is kind of held down by it. But other than that, like I said, this is a solid all-around mid-range smartphone. Of course, I'm recommending the 6GB, 128GB variant of the POCO M5s, which is the one that I have. With that little of a price difference, just go for the 6GB, 128GB variant. I'll leave the links in the description if you guys want to buy the POCO M5s. And hopefully I didn't forget anything. Again, special thanks to POCO for sending me a unit of their POCO M5s. Much appreciated. And hopefully I didn't forget anything. Of course, as always, leaving a like is the easiest way to support the channel. Consider subscribing if you like my content, and turn on notifications for all so you'll be updated on my latest videos. Stay safe mga kuya. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Flip a bag, now I'm serving a Tesla. Going back, shawty with me, I stepped up. GTA for the ops, ain't no less up. Shawty born to be my angel, yeah, I'm blessed up. Cooking right up in the stew.